You've entered into perimenopause, you've identified as being perimenopausal, and now you're wondering, how long is this going to last?
How long is this going to take?
Because it seems to take forever, or it seems on social media that it takes forever, and you want concrete facts of what's coming up for you. This is the video where I'm going to break this down. Hi, my name is Dr. Carrie Jones. I am a women's health and hormone expert, and you're going to want to hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with other videos answering all of your questions, because I know hormones can feel like herding cats. All right, let's get into it. First of all, there are over 100 signs and symptoms of perimenopause, and that's largely been dictated by a 2023 survey by Andrea Donsky and her team at Morphus, where they interviewed over 3,000 women, that's grown exponentially since then, and what their top signs and symptoms were. So we have over 100 that we're working with that you may or may not get. Don't worry, it's not like you're going to get all 100, but you may get some or chunks of some or large sums here and there. Now, when it comes to when is this going to end? Well, this is the FAQ on it because you didn't come with a manual, and it's not exactly black and white. It's kind of a gray area, but I'm going to break down what we know based on some lab work, some symptoms you're having, your periods, if you have them, what's going on, so you kind of have an idea. All right, first and foremost, perimenopause. Perimenopause happens for 6 to 10 years. Once you start making some changes in your cycle, if you have one, if you've had your uterus removed, I will get to that at the end. But once you start having changes in your cycle and having some symptoms, 6 to 10 years until you hit menopause. Menopause is one day. It is the day you have gone 12 consecutive months with no period. So you skip a period, you skip another period, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're counting consecutively. You hit 12. Congratulations, you get a crown, a watch, a party. You are considered menopausal. It's one day. The next day, you are considered postmenopausal for the rest of your life. You do not have a cycle. You do not get your period. It is done. The ovaries have gone to bed. So now you can understand, okay, where am I? Perimenopausal, 6 to 10 years. Menopausal is one day, 12 months, no period, and then postmenopausal. All right, so let's go from there. Now, symptoms may start early related to the hormones that are changing. In early perimenopause, usually it's progesterone declining symptoms that show up. You notice insomnia. You notice mood changes. You notice more irritation and irritability. You might notice heavier periods and worse PMS. That can change as you start to lose estrogen. Low estrogen symptoms are things like night sweats and hot flashes, dryness, eye dryness, joint dryness, vaginal dryness. You may notice some weight gain. So you can see, if you're listening to this thinking, oh, I'm in the insomnia stage, I don't get hot flashes yet, you're in the early part. But if you're like, girl, I've been doing this a long time, I'm in the hot flashes, night sweats, everything's dry, it's, the 7 dwarves of menopause, I hate this, you're more in the late, right? You're more in the late. Okay, now, early stage perimenopause, how would you know other than symptoms? Well, the only true definition, oddly enough, of perimenopause is how often you get your period. In early perimenopause, they say you're there once your period has started changing by 7 days, which I didn't make the rules. I would have made them a little bit different because I find women, their period starts to alter by 3 or 4 days for a while, and they're clearly perimenopausal, and they're clearly having symptoms. Usually it's fatigue, insomnia, mood changes. That's usually what I see right away. Late stage perimenopause is when you start skipping 2 or more periods. You go 60 days, no period. Now you may get a period after 60 days, but you may not. You may skip 3 periods and then you get a period. So it's this back and forth of like skip a few periods, get a period, skip a few periods, get a period. That's considered late stage. So now you have an idea of, okay, am I early in the cycle of perimenopause or late in the cycle of perimenopause? Am I far away from the whole transition of menopause or am I closer to it? All right. Once you go 3 or more skip cycles, research says like you're 95% likely to become fully menopausal within 4 years. So if you're listening to this and you're like, that's me, I routinely skip 3 periods. I may get a period here and there, but I routinely skip 3 periods. You're within 4 years going to be menopausal. You're going to like walk through that door, walk through that day, get your crown, and move on to postmenopause. So that'll help you understand like how many years are you at. On average-ish, the average woman probably spends, they say 6 to 10 years in perimenopause, and so it's like a couple years in the early part, a couple years in the late part, and then you go to be fully postmenopausal. Now, what if your cycle hasn't changed at all? What if you're like, I'm having some symptoms, but my periods are pretty regular? Here's what they say, and not everybody's absolute, but here we go. So they say about 50% of women experience period changes by the time they hit 45 years old, 45.5 actually. They say 75% of women experience period changes once they hit 47.5 years old. So that's just a 2-year difference. Then they say by the time you hit 50.8 years old, 95% of women are like, yep, that's me. I'm having lots of period changes. So if you are in your 40s and you haven't yet had the period changes, you're probably in one of these boxes. It's either coming or you're like, no, I'm 47, totally having period changes. You may notice it just by a couple of days, 7 days, or you may be already at the like, I'm skipping cycles part. So you can sort of take like which bucket you're in for that part. Now, several women report to me that as they progress along the whole perimenopausal transition, that the early symptoms go away and make way for the late symptoms. So the whole mood swings, the insomnia, the fatigue tends to get better as you skip cycles and your estrogen goes down. As your estrogen is more stable, low, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying you go from crazy estrogen and no progesterone to no progesterone and no estrogen. This is assuming you're not on hormone replacement therapy. So as your estrogen stabilizes low, the mood tends to calm down. The sleep tends to improve because you're not in this wild all over roller coaster that you didn't sign up for. Now, other symptoms can move in its place. Like I said, hot flashes, night sweats, muscle pains, joint pains, dryness, et cetera, weight gain. But the early stuff does tend to get better. And treatment obviously makes all of this way better. So whether you are a candidate for hormones, remember there are more than one hormone. So whether you're on progesterone and estrogen, testosterone, maybe some sort of combination, maybe only one of them, that's very helpful. But so is the diet, the lifestyle, the stress support, the sleep, the supplements, right? Like these can all make a big role in outcomes for your perimenopausal transition. Now, lastly, what about if you don't have a uterus? You still have your ovaries, but you don't have a uterus. Well, then we rely on the hormone called FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. Whereas do you or don't you get a period is sort of the big marker for how far along you are or aren't, which stage you're in. If you don't get a period, how do you know? So then we go by FSH. So let's say even if you have a progestin IUD, you have the Mirena, the Skyla, the Kylena, or like I said, you had your uterus removed, FSH. Once your FSH crosses above 10, you get a blood draw. FSH is above 10. Now I'm like, okay. There's some miscommunication between the brain and the ovaries. The follicles have declined. You are definitely perimenopausal. Once you get above 20, I'm like, ooh, you're close. Most labs say once you're above 25, you're considered postmenopausal. Some labs say above 30, depends on what your reference range is, but that'll give you an idea. So for you, if you have a progestin IUD, so you don't really know what's going on with, bleeding or not bleeding, you've had a hysterectomy, or maybe you've had an ablation, pay attention to your FSH. Maybe you get an FSH as part of your yearly blood draw. And if you notice it's going from 6 to 10 to 12 to 18 to 22, it's like, oh, you're so close. You're so close in knowing whether or not you're postmenopausal. So while this wasn't able to give you an exact date, like a calculation, an app to plug in to say, when am I going to be done with this whole thing? We don't have that technology yet. You didn't come with a manual, as I said. Hopefully this is helpful for you to understand, are my periods regular or not? There are early and late stage perimenopause. Once I start skipping 3 periods in a row, I'm 95% chance of going through the entire transition to menopause within 4 years. And by the time I'm 45.5, 50% are going to have cycle changes. 2 years later, 75%, and by 50.8, 95%. So to give you just like a few statistics to wrap your head around, but always know you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer. Please do not suffer. Please do not think you need to hold your chin high and do nothing about it. There is a lot in the way of hormones, especially if you're a candidate. There is a lot in the way of diet, lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, supplements, etc. You are not alone in this, and there is a lot that can be done. I have a lot of videos covering this topic to help, but also to help you get this information so you can talk to your healthcare provider about it. So thank you so much for listening. I am Dr. Carrie Jones. Remember to hit that subscribe button. Hormones, especially in perimenopause, feel like you're hurting cats, but I'm here to help.